Welcome to the Alaska Report. I'm Senator Mark Begich. This show is designed to inform you about the issues, programs, and people important to Alaska. As we welcome the new year, in this edition of the Alaska Report, I'm welcoming the latest group of fabulous young Alaskans, interns who worked in our Washington office the last part of this year. Several times a year, we have interns working in our offices in Alaska and in the D.C. office. They get a chance to do a number of things, such as work on legislative issues, work with the media, and help Alaskans who contact our office navigate the many questions they have about the federal government. With me today are Olivia Hernandez and Mercedes Theuer, both originally from Fairbanks, and Lindsay Probst from Anchorage. Welcome to Alaska Report, and what I would like to do is just get a little feel about who you are and let our viewers understand a little bit about why you're here and what made you come to Washington, D.C. Olivia?
Like you mentioned, I'm originally from Fairbanks. I recently just graduated from the University of Oregon, majoring in international relations with a focus in conflict resolution. And
as they say, conflict resolution is necessary more than ever around this place.
Yes,
so it's a
definitely.
Great skill.
Yes, thank
you.
you.
Have a master's degree just in that.
And I've actually worked on your 2008 campaign, and I really wanted to come to DC and work for you in the DC office and kind of see what the DC office is all about. I'm really interested in public policy, so I really wanted to come here and kind of try that.
Fantastic. Mercedes?
And I'm also from Fairbanks, and I went to Seattle University and graduated with political science and economics in '08, and since then I've worked in the Alaska legislature, worked in a local nonprofit in my hometown, and I am a graduate student for a master's in public policy at American University, and I wanted to stay connected to the Alaska story, I guess you could say, and so it's been great being here and feeling more at home with other Alaskans and being connected to what's going on back home and in the United States too.
Excellent. Lindsay?
Well, I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, where I attended West Anchorage High School. I then went to Syracuse University in New York. I studied both political science and international relations, and then I got my master's degree from New York University in international relations. So I've been studying politics.
So two international relations.
Exactly.
That's very interesting.
I've been studying politics for so long now, and I really wanted to sort of see it in action versus just the more academic side of it. So
the one thing that I have to say to our viewers, and I mention this often on when I have interns here, your workspace that you have is, how would I say, compact, to say the least. But I joke a little about it because it is a very small, it's a hallway literally. But what's amazing about it is the work that you have to do in that space, and the amount of traffic that's flowing through there is amazing. And I guess if each one of you, and maybe I'll start with you, Mercedes, maybe tell me a little about what are the area that you kind of covered, or where, when you're been working as an intern, what are the subjects that you got into here?
Well, some of the subjects included healthcare reform, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, mostly answering
Did you work
questions.
with constituents who would call in and say, where's my Social Security check?
I didn't do that.
Okay. Those are tough ones, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I definitely answered letters about Social Security cuts or lack thereof, answered a lot of healthcare reform questions, or tried to anyway.
Right. I mean, one of the big issues I'm sure you heard through the letters was the issue of the Social Security checks didn't increase this year because of inflation was almost zero, and the work that we had to do to try to add money, the $250 bonus. But I'm assuming some of those letters came in and said, what happened? And you had to explain and then talk about some of the work we had to do. And Lindsay, what was the area that you got into?
Well, I got to focus a lot on defense and military issues, as well as veterans issues, which is a huge topic up in Alaska, obviously, as well as some foreign policy, and then just a broad span of issues from constituents calling in about current legislation and things that they were concerned about. So
you all work the front desk at some point, right? So when you, and I guess I want to make sure the viewers know, when you say working with constituents, that is also when they call in.
Right.
And they're saying what's happening on a vote, or what's going on, how does this relate to Alaska, or why is he voting this way, or why didn't he vote the other way? Those are the kind of contacts you have.
Absolutely.
Olivia, what was your area?
The main topics that I covered were the environment and energy issues, which is a really big topic in Alaska. As well as some issues covering some things like immigration issues, and those were kind of the main things. I got a lot of letters about energy issues in Alaska.
I bet you did. And right now we're in the middle of, this will air later, but as we talk today, one of the issues that we're dealing with is the DREAM Act, which is an immigration. So I'm assuming you got people
Yes.
calling or sending emails about that issue.
Yes, and a lot of constituent calls
Yeah.
came in about that. So
It's amazing, and tell me if any of you saw this happen, and that lots of times people will call and they'll have a little bit of the information, and then when they learn more about it, their opinion may move or at least be more neutral depending on the information they had. I think DREAM Act is an example where
Definitely.
I know people who call me or talk to me, they have one thought about it, and as you explain it, it's a little different. Did any of you have that experience when you had someone on the phone and you said, well, did you know, fill in the blank, that sometimes they would have a different thought?
definitely, I definitely did with the DREAM Act and also with the Food Safety Act.
Food Safety Act,
Yes.
absolutely,
Mhm.
yeah.
And so when I was able to tell them a little bit more about it, they said, "Oh, well, thank you so much for that information. I'll definitely have to think about that and research that more." And they were really happy for getting that information.
Tell me if I'm right, one of the issues I remember on the food safety was people were concerned that farmer markets were going to
Yeah.
be over-regulated,
Right.
and for Alaska it's a big deal. And I know Senator Tester worked on an amendment that I supported, and a lot of people didn't realize that we heard the Alaskans and we wanted to fix this problem. Is that kind of one of the issues that
was
popped up?
definitely one of
Yeah.
them.
Absolutely.
And they were all very pleased by that.
Yes.
It's always good to have someone happy, right? I mean, at the end of the day. What was, for you, Mercedes, would you say, as you worked on the issues, because some of you crossed over in other issues that are not necessarily in your area, what was probably the hardest issue that you had to deal with, or they were so complex that maybe there wasn't enough information, could always get out enough information?
Honestly, part of a big chunk of what I did was healthcare reform, but I think that was actually the most complex because there's so much to it, and I couldn't really tell you that I have a comfortable grasp on it, but I definitely feel like I learned more about it. But it's still very complex for everybody to understand exactly what the repercussions of the bill and
what benefits they get or not
Right.
get, and when do they take place? Is that some of the questions you would get? People say, why is this not happening for me, but I hear such and such
Right.
can get the benefit and I can't, those kinds of things?
Right, exactly, and why some folks are like at Providence Hospital in Anchorage, I believe, several people had called in and said that their spouse is an employee of Providence Hospital, that they'll be dropped from their health insurance, and that was something we heard a lot. And so understanding why was pretty difficult.
Why did you, each one of you have a kind of similar, international affairs, but really public policy. Yours is public policy, international affairs, political science, but all of it's about working in the kind of the public arena. Kind of give me why you kind of chose this field. I'll start with Lindsay, and kind of what got you interested
Right,
in
exactly.
this?
Well, I think it's a really rewarding field as far as you're giving back to your country, and you have the opportunity to be engaged in a lot of different issues that really affect people's everyday, day-to-day lives. So it's a really important field.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It's definitely rewarding, but I'm sure you could also understand occasionally frustrating too, because
I understand every
Right.
day.
but it's definitely rewarding to be able to give back, and but frustrating in terms of not being able to know how. But you have to learn how to problem solve and learn how you can give back, and ultimately there's a result at the end of the day or year.
Or year, or multiple years. Olivia?
And I would just add that I really enjoy working with people, and that's the biggest thing for me. The biggest reward is I really like talking to people, understanding what their issues are, what their problems are, how I can maybe help, and just getting to know a lot of different people and kind of discover a whole bunch of new things all the time. So.
What was it like for your first, you come to Washington D.C. and you're now put into the cubicle, the space to work, and then they say, oh, by the way, this isn't just going to be answering phones and not sitting there just doing filing. You're going to have some issues. You're going to have to work on some stuff. It's going to be substantive. But oh, by the way, go find your way around Washington here. I know what it was like for me in my first several days, if not several months. What was it like for you, Olivia, to kind of be put into this situation? And then how did you work with other offices in this process?
Well, it was definitely a little bit overwhelming at first. We definitely get lost around the buildings
It
around
is a
DC.
maze.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
But everyone that I've worked with in different offices and in our own office, they're very, very friendly, very welcoming. It's been really fantastic working with them. They're always very helpful and willing to answer any questions. So it was really easy to kind of ease into it and kind of learn your way through different things.
Did you have a chance to meet other folks in other offices and have some relationship building with other senatorial offices? Or?
Well, as an intern, we definitely had intern kind of classes, kind of learning about what the Senate does and different things like that. So we were able to meet definitely other interns in that arena.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Mercedes, what was your first experience here?
Well, the first time I walked all the way to the Rayburn office building, I was really excited I didn't get lost.
Yeah, which let me say to the viewers,
Right.
that is, we're on the Senate side, then there's the House side, and the Capitol sits in the middle. So it is not just like a straight shot. People think, oh, you just get in a hallway and you
Right.
go straight across. That is not the
Right.
case. In the Rayburn building, it's a maze to get there.
Yeah, and that just kind of goes to show you that if you're excited that you didn't get lost, that's saying how confusing it gets around in between. But yeah, I feel really small. I just feel I'm totally surrounded by history, by all these hardworking people, and it's really exciting to be here. And everyone's very helpful and very friendly, and you can definitely tell everyone works really hard and for the good of the people. So
There we go.
it's great.
Lindsay, what was your first
Well, it's
experience
definitely
like?
overwhelming, and I tell people that just now I'm finally comfortable with navigating around the buildings. So right before I leave, I finally get it. But it's been a great experience, and like Mercedes said, just the history of the buildings, knowing what's gone on here as far as the history of our nation, and also the people that you meet, whether it's in the Capitol or just around D.C., because everyone's sort of engaged in politics and the field that I'm interested in. So it's been really great.
Did you all have a chance, I'm assuming the answer is just this, because almost every intern says, when Alaskans come and they want to get a sense of the Capitol or go around, you take them on some of those tours, is that right?
Yeah.
And Lindsay, what was that like? I mean, first, it's probably nice to see Alaskans coming
Yeah,
and be able to have kind of, tell me what's going on back home,
Right,
which is always
exactly.
positive. We just had a reception this last month with almost 100 Alaska Native community members that came here, so it's always kind of fun to have that. What were some of those experiences like? And
Well, the tours are great to give. I mean, you meet a lot of Alaskan families and people that are in D.C. maybe for the very first time. So just sort of sharing the experience with them as they go around the Capitol and are sort of witnesses to what's happening in Congress right now is really, really interesting. So.
same experiences for both of you?
Yeah, I really like seeing other Alaskans, definitely.
Let me ask you, you've done the internship. Did you think this fulfilled what you expected and what you had hoped for? And would you tell other folks that this is an opportunity worthwhile, Mercedes? And how
Yeah,
would you see this?
definitely.
Did it fill what you were hoping for? And
Yeah, I think it was definitely a great experience. I mean, I was also more or less part-time because I was doing full-time graduate school, so I
Right.
don't necessarily recommend doing that. But
a little stressful?
it was, but honestly, the staff, intern coordinator, everybody was extremely flexible and made sure, and my semester turned out great, so I don't
So
have
you
any
didn't fail
complaints.
any classes that
Oh,
we're aware of? Okay, we didn't cause that.
But
Okay.
so I'd recommend if you were in school and doing this, be prepared to take more time off than you expect at the end of the semester. So
There we go. Olivia?
That's great.
I would definitely recommend doing this. I actually already have to several of my friends. And actually, we were discussing Capitol tours. And oftentimes, parents come to me and say, well, I think this would really be a great thing for my child. Would you recommend it? And I always say yes. Because
During the tours, you mean?
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
very interesting.
Yeah. So I think that it'd be a really, really great experience. Yeah.
Lindsay, did it fulfill what you were hoping for,
Absolutely.
or would you recommend it?
Yeah, I mean, just getting to know about so many different issues that you might not otherwise know about, or pieces of legislation that you might not otherwise know about, has been really great. And the staff has been extremely welcoming to us and tried to involve us in a lot of things. So
We're going to take a quick break here on the Alaska Report. When we come back, we will continue talking with the 3 interns who worked in our Washington office over the past few months. We'll be right back.
It may seem intimidating, but really, it's one of the easiest things you can ever do.
I've been practicing.
Good. You're gonna need it.
Help America's youth. Be a friend. Be a mentor. Just be there.
Go to bigbrothersbigsisters.org.
Along with weight loss, it's one of the many ways to fight osteoarthritis pain. For more information on managing pain, go to fightarthritispain.org.
Welcome back to the Alaska Report. I'm Senator Mark Begich. Today I'm talking to 3 young Alaskans who have spent the last several months working in our Washington, D.C. office. Olivia, Mercedes, and Lindsay, welcome back, and thank you again for your willingness to be in Washington, D.C., work in our office, talk about all the issues, and also talk to so many constituents that we have calling in all the time. This is going to be an opportunity for you guys to ask me some questions. We're going to turn the tables here, but one last thing I'll comment, and I know in the process of becoming an intern, your writing skills were important as a part of the process. I will tell you, when I was going to school, this was one area I was not a very big fan of, but when I see the work we have to produce here, and when I was mayor and when I was on the assembly, the amount of writing, reading, comprehension that you have to do is enormous. And I know the process isn't complicated, but that is one of the things, would you agree, is important, that you have writing skills, that because the communication back to folks, maybe email, letter, and so forth, is critical.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me allow you, I'm a little nervous about this because you guys have answered all the issues, so you probably have more in depth on some of these issues, but you get a chance to turn the tables on me, and I get to answer questions you may have. So who wants to start first?
I'll start.
I'm just going to go right there.
Okay, that's perfect.
Olivia?
Well, working here this fall, I think one of the biggest issues that's been discussed is earmarks, especially earmarks in education. And as a Fairbanksan, I've really seen the benefits of funding from earmarks in the community. And as a recent graduate, I really understand and know that earmarks are extremely important to higher education. Right. So I was wondering what you believe or what you think is the future for earmarks in Alaska, and specifically maybe earmarks in education in Alaska.
Well, I think first off, the issue of earmarks has gotten kind of a bad rap. What it really is issues that senators, House members bring forward in the budget process that they've heard from local constituents. Because the bureaucracy moves, as you have all experienced, slow, and they don't necessarily respond as fast to the local communities and what's really coming out. So to me, first off, earmarks have gotten a bad rap. Second, how you manage those is very important. Our office took a pretty strong lead at the very beginning that it's transparency 100%. In other words, if you ask for an earmark, it's going to be posted. If we are able to secure an earmark, it's posted. In other words, who asked for it, where it's going. That's not always the case in all the offices. They usually just post what they ask for from a senator to the committee. We do it, if anybody asks for it, we post it, which is far beyond the requirement. We think that's important because people want to know who's asking, who's not asking, why they're asking, what it's for. So transparency is very important. The second thing is recognizing the fiscal constraints of the federal budget. Earmarks are less than 1% of the total budget, but we spend 100% of the time, it seems, debating earmarks. But for all the reasons you just said, they're very valuable in bringing everything from education issues, infrastructure. When you look at the list of port projects that we invest into, or road projects, or medical facilities, some of the clinics we've done, that's pretty important. I was up in, I think it was the Bethel region, saw an earmark we allocated there for a domestic violence shelter. Very important to help finish a project that they already had lots of money for, but they just need this last little bit to kind of close the deal, and a huge benefit for that community. But you can go through many of these and see the value. My favorite one, of course, being a former mayor of Anchorage, Lake Otis and Tudor, was finished on 2 parts. One with recovery money, but also a couple of years when I was mayor, we were able to secure earmarks to help make that project completed. So I think that it's going to be tough rolling over the next year. It will be less of them, and it's hard to say where it will all end up at the end of the day, but I'm going to continue to fight for what I think Alaskans tell me are important projects that we can bring forward. It doesn't mean every project gets funded, but we're going to look for ones that are valid, have strong community support, and can be matched against state and local dollars to really get the big benefit. But it's going to be a lot tighter than ever before.
Well, my master's degree, I created a concentration in intergovernmental relations because I understand the operations of Alaska are very reliant upon the relationships between cities, boroughs, Alaska Native corporations, the state, and the federal government. So my question for you is, as your role as U.S. Senator and mayor of the state's largest city, what have you learned about the unique nature of the intergovernmental relations of Alaska.
I smile only because it's different. So
Yeah.
I will say this, first being mayor, you're in a different kind of role. You're in an executive role. So you get to really, if you want to move forward on something as we did in Anchorage, if you go through Anchorage now, you'll see a new museum, new convention center, multiple roads, 3 new fire stations, the list goes on, that we did in a very short time, because you can actually make those decisions. Here, it's a little bit slower. So having that experience is very helpful. So when you're working with agencies, because you've been on the administrative side, you understand what they're going through. So as you're drafting legislation that may affect an agency, but is important to Alaska, you know kind of the agencies to work with. Because one thing as mayor, you really weren't a specialist in one specific area. You had to be a specialist in many areas. So that's very advantageous when you come here in the Senate, in a legislative body. So as you're working, maybe it's on a piece of legislation, but you know the implementation of it is going to take regulatory process that the federal government has to do, and then work with state agencies and local governments in Alaska, that you're able to see that from a broader picture and help make that coordination happen as you draft the legislation. That to me is a huge benefit, because a simple thing, we're working on a piece of legislation now, it's mixed into the FAA bill, the Federal Aviation Administration's bill, and it's just making sure we can transport oxygen to our communities. Small issue, but pretty big if you can't transport that to a small area by plane. And so understanding the federal agencies that are involved in that, understanding how to write the legislation, and then making sure that they can implement it is critical. So you can't just pass laws and hope it all works out.
Right.
You're absolutely right. This connection after you pass a law is more critical afterwards, because if it doesn't get implemented, guess who we hear from? The constituents right away. They say, well, you passed the law, why isn't it happening? Or 2 years later, yeah, it's happening, but it's happening the wrong direction, or it's not doing the right thing. So it's important, and being mayor really is a great experience. Obviously I'm biased. I would tell every senator they should be a mayor first. First off, you have to face your constituents every single day, every single hour. Second, you have to administer and actually take responsibility for your actions. Third, you have to actually balance a budget. And fourth, if you make a mistake in your implementation, you're going to hear about it. Here, it could take years before something gets done. So I think the experience is very helpful in that making sure all those pieces connect as you deliver a piece of legislation or a capital project or anything like that. Lindsay?
Well, as I mentioned previously, I've been studying international relations for many years. It's a field that I'm very interested in. And so I know that Alaska has a very unique strategic location in terms of its proximity to both Eurasia and also the Arctic.
Yes.
And so I know you've been engaged in sort of Arctic policy, and I'm wondering what you see as Alaska's future role in our country's international engagement in Arctic policy.
It's interesting, when you were describing some of the areas you worked on at the very beginning of the show, 11% of the population of Alaskans are veterans. We have close to 30,000 active military families and military personnel. We have a missile defense system, very important to the strategic defense of this country, and the list goes on and on. Then you add now the Arctic, which is a very unique situation for us, because if you think about the country, we would not be an Arctic nation without Alaska. We wouldn't even, it wouldn't be on our radar screen in essence. But because we are an Arctic nation and because Alaska is so vital, there's multiple things, as you know, we've done in regards to Arctic legislation. Everything from, there's going to be a lot of transportation going on up there that's going to be out of our control. There's going to be oil and gas development, there's going to be mineral development, there's going to be fishing, the list goes on and on. And at the same time, we have international activities that have to go around this. The sad part is there's a treaty that's pending called the Law of the Sea. We are not part of it. Every other country that touches the Arctic is. We are not. The problem with that is if we are not at the table, we cannot figure out our jurisdiction and where we need to play a significant role, maybe on anything from, like I said, the development, but even the transportation. My biggest worry is we're going to have freighters and other large vessels moving through there, and if they run into a situation, maybe a run aground or anything like that, we're going to be having to respond. But we're not part of an agreement of how all this is going to work, which I think is very problematic. I think more and more of my colleagues are recognizing that the Arctic is going to be a huge future economically and from trade and from development, but also from fishing, from preservation, you name it. It's kind of a multifaceted. Alaska is going to be in the forefront because you can't do Arctic policy without being in Alaska. And we have some great, as you know, university systems up there. We have some great Arctic research centers. I think we'll see a bigger and bigger role that we'll play, not only from an Alaska perspective, but an international perspective of how we engage in the Arctic. My role on the Commerce Committee, we deal with a lot of science, technology, and obviously the Arctic is a big piece of that. So we will be very significant in the long term. Right now, it's actually getting people to recognize that actually Alaska does exist. We do have an Arctic Ocean up there that we have some opportunity here by getting people. We've brought recently Senator Debbie Stabenow, who's now going to be the head of the Agricultural Committee, up to Barrow. She had never been there, to the North Slope. Very important and exciting for her, but also because she chairs a committee now, that's important for us from Alaska's perspective. So you're right, it's a cutting edge opportunity for us. And for us not to take an active role would be a huge mistake, and we are aggressive about it. I will say one quick thing before we have to sign off here, and that is there was one time, I think it was the Interior Department had an Arctic policy where they were going to do climate change activities in offices. The one state they didn't have one in, they were only going to do 5 of these, was Alaska, which made no sense. That we are ground zero, but also because of the Arctic policy.
Right.
Well, let me say a couple things. First, thank you all for your willingness to participate in this show. Thanks for turning the table on me and asking questions, but also thanks for spending the time here in Washington helping Alaskans figure out where to go and what to do. We're out of time, as this time flies very quickly with the Alaska Report. I want to again thank our guests, Olivia, Mercedes, and Lindsay, and thank all of you again for the great work you've done on behalf of Alaskans. It has made an impact. People will feel it for years to come, on the small things to the big things. So again, thank you for all of that. And thank you for joining us on the Alaska Report. I'm Senator Mark Begich. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.